Okay. Well, thank you all for being here today. And just as a general introduction, this is the University of Montana Alumni Association Shaping Our Future event with 3 panelists that we'll introduce soon. I want to thank everyone that's taken time out of their day to come and be here. I'll just go over a couple little bits of information about the event, and then we'll get straight into the questions for our panelists here today. The main thing is that this is just a nonpartisan event to connect with different UM alumni and see how they've been doing in the world of politics and how they've been influencing it, as well as how their UM experience has shaped their influence or shaped their experience in politics in general. Just a quick tidbit for the panelists as well, after every question that we ask, I'll post it in the chat so you'll have a way to reference it when you're answering the questions in the future. And then questions from the audience member, you can post that in the Facebook chat, and we will try to incorporate that into the questions that we ask the panelists. So just to start out with, the moderators will introduce themselves, and there are 2 here today. I'm one of them. My name is Ethan Hanley. I'm a senior here at the University of Montana studying accounting, and I am currently serving as the ASUM business manager for this academic year. And now I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm a junior studying psychology. I serve as an ASUM senator and as the chair of MontPIRG.
Great. Well, I think with that, we'll go ahead and get into our list of questions. And the first question that we have for our panelists, please tell us when you graduated from the University of Montana and what your experience in politics has been following your graduation. And I'll go ahead and start with Katie first.
Sorry, muted there. Hi there, I'm Katie Sullivan. I graduated from the University of Montana in human biology in 2006 and then went to law school at U of M and graduated in 2010. After that, I went to the University of Colorado School of Law and did an LLM program and then moved back to Missoula to work as an attorney. Now I'm a solo attorney in town. And my experience with politics during and after graduation. So during my LLM, I studied information technology law, which got me really interested in privacy law and technology policy. And it's something I've just been passionate about since my LLM program. But then after moving back to Missoula, I ran for my local neighborhood council and I served there for about 5 years, got involved in neighborhood politics. And then after that, I ran for open seat in House District 89 for the Montana legislature. And now here I am, but I would say that I got my start in politics just going to law school and then learning about privacy policy, and it started the passion for policy from there.
Great. Heather, go right ahead.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm Heather O'Loughlin. I live in Helena. I graduated from the University of Montana with my undergraduate degree in economics and business finance. And then I too went to law school at the University of Montana. I spent a little bit of time just familiarizing myself with politics in Montana while I was an undergraduate. During my law school time, I served as the student regent for the Board of Regents, the governing body for the university system. And after I graduated with my law degree, I had the privilege of going to DC and serving as policy advisor and legislative director for Senator Max Baucus. So I spent about 7 years in DC, came back home to Montana after my daughter was born, and I now serve as the co-director of the Montana Budget and Policy Center. So I do some policy work on a state level through my organization. And through that have had really the great fortune of working with both of the other 2 panelists during their time in the legislature. I now also serve as city commissioner for the city of Helena, was elected to that position in 2017.
Great. And then last but not least, Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan and Kelly. My name's Zach Brown. I graduated from U of M with my undergrad in environmental studies in 2013. I really got my start into policy world as an undergrad. I, in addition to lots of other things, that were just mostly related to student group work that I was doing. I guess that all culminated my senior year with serving as ASUM president in 2012 and 13. But before that, I actually, just a fun sort of side story, is I put on an environmental policy conference for student groups across the state during the 2011 legislative session. And it's just fun to think back on that, because that was really sort of the jumping off point into eventually serving in the legislature. But panelists that I recruited to speak at that event were Kathleen Williams, Ryan Zinke, Brian Schweitzer, Attorney General Bullock, and Senator Tester. It was just kind of an interesting time, I think, to look back at Montana politics. And so then after graduation, I spent a year in DC, had a very short internship actually in Senator Baucus's office, where I first met Heather, and did some policy research at Georgetown University. And then the last 6 years, I've been serving in the Montana House of Representatives, representing Bozeman and the campus of Montana State University. Bozeman's my hometown. And I was just this last fall elected to the Gallatin County Commission.
All right, great. Our next question for you is, when you were a student at UM, what were you involved in on campus, and how did that shape your experience in politics? Starting with Katie again.
All right, so actually I wasn't involved in politics on campus. That wasn't something that I started participating in and like actively in politics until after my time on campus. But I would say, that being said, my time on campus did influence politics, in that studying law and going and doing my LLM program in information technology it showed me how interested I was in policy, how interested I am in law, the creation of law. And that's when I really started to realize my passion for that. And so not so much an on-campus experience specifically in politics, but just the education I had that really contributed to forming my passions going forward. So.
All right, Heather.
Yeah, so I too, like Zach, was involved in ASUM during my time. I think I started with ASUM as a sophomore and was elected vice president, well, appointed vice president, and then elected business manager my senior year. And so definitely my experiences with ASUM certainly shaped my my feelings and experiences on policy work. And it's been really kind of fun to reflect back on those years. You know, I think one of the things that I think about and that stands out very vividly during my time on campus, there was I would say some tension between campus and you know, the surrounding neighborhoods. And during that time, there was a push in city council or a proposed ordinance that was put forward that I think would have created pretty significant barriers for students accessing housing in the community. So I think that experience really taught me that the voices of students were really important in that process. I, you know, feel very fortunate to have gotten to work with the leaders before me and community leaders that were really supportive of the university and students. And I think I'd learned that, you know, the impact, both negative and positive, that policies can have on our communities. The following year, when I was vice president at ASUM, we established the ASUM Renter Center to support students accessing housing, and I think it still exists today, which is nice to see. And I think really came about as part of that kind of tension or pressure within the community. So that's a little bit of my experience during my time as an undergraduate, and I would say without a doubt it shaped the work that I continue to do today.
Zach?
Yeah, I think that part of what's fun to hear about that is I've known Heather very well over the last few years, and I didn't know some of that. Town and gown politics when I was ASUM president were a huge focus of my year. We had a accessory dwelling unit debate happening in front of city council, and I was very active in advocating for off-campus student housing. And just anyway, some things never change, I guess. I'm sure you all are involved in those discussions today as well, and just part of living in a university town. But my time at U of M was, for better or worse, very political. I initially got involved in university politics advocating for specific projects that were within the UM's climate action plan. We never met the neutrality goals that outgoing President Dennison articulated or signed off on, but I was very active in trying to advocate for steps in that process, which helped me get to know a lot of faculty members and staff and administrators that I continued to work with throughout my college career. And then when I was elected, I guess my junior and senior year, so in between getting elected as ASUM president, that was in the middle of my senior year was the first year of enrollment declines. And so I was unfortunately involved in the first round of budget cuts. That year was also the time of the NCAA, Department of Justice, and Department of Education investigations around sexual assault. And I was involved on the university court and just in all those discussions and investigations representing students. That senior year, we also had a legislative session, and U of M had the highest priority in the university system for an infrastructure project, which was funding for the Missoula College. And students went to bat very hard for that project. And I found myself, on one hand, kind of in a public wrestling match with one of our Missoula's legislators who was opposed to the project, and sending out press releases and trying to counter his messaging and lobbying in the halls of the Capitol. And then on the other hand, dealing with town and gown issues related to the proposed location of that building, which was going to be UM's golf course. And there were a lot of neighbors in the university district who were incredibly upset about that proposal. And, for better or worse, we took the side of the university and advocated for moving that building to the golf course, which ultimately the administration decided not to do to avoid some of those issues. But so by the time I graduated from college, I was kind of worn out by local politics, to be honest with you. But it was really a fascinating and fast-paced learning environment, and I was exposed to a lot, which I'm really grateful for.
Great. So our next question is, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned in working with other elected representatives and listening to your constituents? And I'll kick it off with Zach this time. We'll go in reverse order.
Well, I guess one sort of generic and obvious thought is just that so much of what happens in local government, I think, and state government and all forms of government at the end of the day, and just a fundamental part of the job of representing other people is listening. I think when there is vitriol or conflict or dissatisfaction, there, of course, often or typically are structural issues that cause that dissatisfaction, maybe specific policy issues or issues with the delivery of a service, for example. But fundamentally, many people just want to be heard. And I think kind of understanding that truth about human beings, I want to be heard. Everyone on this call has that fundamental desire. And I think that is a really front and center job of serving the people you work for, and just serving in an elected office is being willing to give your personal time and space to other people who need to just feel like they're being listened to. That doesn't solve every problem, because many policy problems are way more complicated than a simple human-to-human interaction, of course, but that's a great place to start with just about anything. So
I'll go to Heather.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first part of the question about working with other elected officials, I mean, I think the thing that I've learned is, each person comes with their own experience, background, and perspective. And I think I've certainly learned a lot from other elected officials, both in my capacity as an elected official, but working with state policymakers as well. I've had the opportunity to work with policymakers that I may not share a lot of similarities with, but I think at the end of the day, you find common ground on things that are important for your constituencies. I would say building relationships is just a huge part of that. And I think one thing that I have also learned is that as you're building those trusted relationships, being honest with your colleagues is really important. I think where I've seen this break down is when you have a situation where someone has conveyed, that they will do something, and then they do the opposite of that. And that can be, I think, a difficult situation, because really a lot of this is just about relationships. The second part of the question, I think, is an interesting one. And I would agree with everything that Zach said. A big part of this is listening. I think, in my experience in policy making on a variety of levels, I think it's fairly typical that there's a subset of individuals that have, pretty easy and consistent access to the policymaking process. And sometimes that access, is correlated to, perceived power, money, and I would say on a local level, often a surplus of free time to be engaged in a process that can often be complicated and time consuming. I think it's pretty typical that you have in policy decisions on all levels, you have constituents that support a decision and constituents that don't. So, what does listening to constituents really mean? I think that probably takes a different form depending on who you're talking to. I would say during my time over the years, I've tried to reach out to get the perspectives of those who may not have an easy entry point into the policy making process. And I think in some instances are experiencing, oppression or, challenges by the very systems that we are looking to either maintain or to change. I don't know that I've done it well, but it's something that I keep in mind. I would say on a local level, a big thing that we grapple with are land use regulations that, Zach has mentioned already. And I'll just put a plug in for a book that I've just started digging into by Catherine Levine Epstein that really digs into the data of the dominance of certain voices when it comes to land use planning. That's definitely been a really interesting dynamic in my time as on the city commission. And I think, it's definitely opened my eyes to, who has a voice in many instances and who's at the table. And something I think about, during my time as an elected official.
Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
Great, thanks. So I was going to comment on national politics right now makes it seem like every politics on all levels is contentious and divided and fighting, and everyone's very upset and yelling at each other. And that's kind of the impression that we're getting from the national political scene. And that might be true in a national level, but on a state level, I've found it to be quite a different experience in that when we get together in person, not online, friendships are forming, we're having great conversations, we're forming great relationships. It's easy to bring up these subjects that are important. We get things done and we do compromise. And so I guess it's a lesson I learned in my political experience is that it's on a state level. I can't comment about the local or the city politics, but on a state level, we do a lot of good together, and there's a lot of bipartisan work. And so I want people to know that it's not as terrible as the news makes it seem, like the national news sometimes makes it feel, and how social media makes it feel. And so I would recommend as a suggestion that if someone has an issue that they're passionate about, or it's important to them, or you want to get something done, jump off social media and call a legislator in Montana. We're very accessible. This is not our full-time job, but we love hearing from constituents. One constituent call can make a difference on a vote that we make. It can make a difference. Giving us bill ideas like, this is Montana, we want to hear from you. And I think you can reach us, at least on a state level, pretty easily. And so I hope people know that, that one call or that one email or that one showing up can make a huge difference in Montana. And so I encourage it. And yeah, I would just say, don't let social media make you feel like that's your only way of having a voice. And then it makes it feel contentious and lots of fighting and back and forth. But, to call us and see if we can help, because we do want to hear from you.
All right, thanks for that. Our next question is, have you ever had the chance to work with UM students in your current or prior capacities? And if so, what was memorable about working with students? And we'll start with Heather, since she hasn't gone first yet.
So my experience with UM students has mostly been in my day job capacity at Montana Budget and Policy Center, and working up at the state legislature. I would just say that I think the students have had a really important voice in a lot of policymaking decisions, and I've really valued the opportunity I've had to work with students. We spend a lot of time tracking the state budget, and a big part of that is investments in education, both K-12 and higher education. And so the students have really played an important role in conveying the importance of those investments for families in Montana. One kind of funny story, we had a pretty difficult budget session in 2017 where state revenue came in lower than expected in the previous year. And so the legislature and the executive branch were really faced with some difficult decisions on cuts. And the university system took the brunt of those cuts in some ways. And I think the students played an important role about really contextualizing what those cuts meant for families and what tuition increases might mean. The legislature ultimately went into a special session that fall, and were faced with making further cuts. And this was like right around kind of football season. And I remember really vividly, I don't think it was the Cat Grizz game, but it was one of the football games at one of the campuses, where the students had hung banners down along the student area about the importance of investments in universities, which I thought was like so creative. You've got just like this massive amount of people in the stadium, and then people watching on TV, and like what a great way to convey a message that I probably would not have thought of. And so I've just really enjoyed working with students in the capacity up at the state legislature, and I think it's fun to see the perspective that they bring and the creativity they bring to it.
All right, Katie?
Sure. So first off, I represent the House District 89, which includes the University of Montana campus. And so the students that live in the dorms and in the university neighborhood are my constituents. And so I do want to hear from them. I want to represent them in Helena. And second, more specifically, working with students is just being in last session working with U of M lobbyists, so ASUM or MontPIRG, or just having students come over for like a student weekend or a student day over at the Capitol, and hearing them talk to legislators in the hallway about tuition costs, affordable housing, landlord-tenant law, things like that, and just seeing them show their passion in person, I think it's really awesome to see. And I think at least for me personally, having a student there just show up and remind you like we're here too, and we need to be heard, and it makes a big impact. And so that's what I would say would be memorable about working with students. And I'm not sure how the next session is going to pan out in terms of with COVID, whether it's online or in person, but I know that U of M students will show up again, or ASUM, I'm sorry, Montana State students as well. Of course, don't want to forget about them, but that I hope they show up, and that even if it's virtual, but it makes a difference, and it's really cool to see.
All right, and Zach?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's worth saying that it's fun to think about this question, because it's a lot of little parts of the last 6 years that easy to, I guess, not remember unless you're prompted. For one thing, I've had 5 different campaign managers or 6 for 4 different campaigns, just because people took other jobs in the middle of it or that sort of thing. But 3 of them were college students at the time, and that went on to work in politics on other campaigns or get jobs with political parties and that sort of thing. And so that's been really rewarding, is just using the excuse of being on the ballot to help young people get experience and exposure, and jump up and advocate for them as they get awesome jobs. I was really involved with external scholarships at the Honors College when I was at U of M, and I've been able to stay involved with the internal vetting process and talk to lots of students who were applying. Especially, I received a Truman and a Udall, and so students that are applying for those, just looking at their applications and helping them with that, and talking with them about the interview process and things like that has been so much fun. Actually, a couple of examples that are really pertinent to policy that I carried. I got interested before the 2017 session in misdemeanor expungement policy. And I had a friend who was a student at the law school who reached out to me about the time I was reading articles about what other states had done, and said, "Hey, I've got a term paper that I need to do. Is there something I could work on that would be helpful to you as a legislator?" And I said, "Yeah, could you do a paper on expungement and tell me what else is out there, and give me some advice, highlight some other examples." And that paper turned into a bill, which ultimately turned into law, which was, I think, really rewarding for Zach, my friend, who's now an attorney working for the PSC, actually. But it was really rewarding for me too, because he added capacity that I didn't have as a citizen legislator with no staff. Then fast forward, I have been having conversations with a faculty member at U of M who's interested in turning that policy program into a clinic at the law school, where law students would potentially assist people in petitioning for expungements. And then, of course, with the new marijuana legalization ballot initiative that just passed, which includes a pretty massive expungement program, that issue is just going to get more and more attention. And so hopefully students will continue to be involved with that. And then one other fun example that I hadn't thought about for a couple of years, but a PhD student in the forestry school actually did a semester project that turned into a report for the Water Policy Interim Committee, which I chaired this last interim, and she was able to direct some of her thesis work and the framing around her initial thesis around some of the big picture policy questions that our committee's grappling with as we think about the future of water rights administration in Montana. And so anyway, there's lots of ways that U of M helped me make my studies practically relevant to the world around me and policy questions around me. And I still have experienced that over and over again as an alumni, that there's students and faculty that are really eager to make your studies practically relevant and useful, and there's avenues to do that. So thanks for asking the question. It's fun to reflect on all that.
Great. And then the last question that we have out of just our introductory 5, I'll ask in a bit, but just as a reminder to people watching, you can submit your own questions through the chat. We'd be more than happy to take them and ask them to the panelists. So the last question that we have on our first set is, who has been a mentor to you in your political career, and how influential were they in shaping your work? This can be someone from your time at UM or someone after your graduation. And I'll go ahead and throw it over to Katie.
Great. So mine is someone who I met after my time at U of M, but it's, I'm going to shout out to Stacy Anderson, who's currently a city council member in Missoula. She's been one of my biggest mentors in political career. And she was someone I was introduced to, I don't know, years ago in Missoula, when I realized that I was interested in politics and interested in policy, and I just didn't know what to do or how I fit into it. And she was like, let's get you involved, like, let's get you started. And she's one of those people that lifts other people up, and invited me to events, plugged me in, introduced me to folks that would maybe help me figure out what I wanted to do. And so I would call Stacy my biggest mentor, and I think she's doing great work on Missoula City Council too. So I hope, you know, one day I get to a point where I can turn around and help someone else who's interested in getting involved in politics and policy, and can introduce them and plug them in. So life goal.
And Zach?
Yeah, the 3 folks that come to mind are all sort of in the same ecosystem when I was at U of M. First was my faculty advisor, Dan Spencer at EVST. He just was completely supportive of every outside of the classroom activity that I could come up with to suggest, and was always encouraging and supportive. He threw me into the external scholarship world, which introduced me to my second person, which was Lori Pengelly Drake at the Honors College. She continues to be a mentor, and just spent so much time in Lori's office strategizing about my career goals and how my academic and extracurricular work created some kind of a sensical narrative that could lead into a career path. I had a very Socratic experience with her, where she just asked endless amounts of hard questions to me, and made me think carefully about how to make decisions and how to use my skill set in an effective way out in the wider world. And then both Dan and Lori introduced me to Congressman Pat Williams when I was thinking about my application for the Udall scholarship, because Pat worked with the Udalls in Congress. And so then I developed this friendship with him that has been incredibly meaningful to me. Pat was a politician, a representative for Montana in Congress for 20 some years. But at his core, he's an educator. He was a teacher before he went into Congress. And as we developed our working relationship, Pat became a regent, and we got involved in some really tough political situations together, me as a student leader and him as a regent. And I'll just say, long story short, there was some really hard things going on there. And I didn't handle everything with grace always. I didn't do everything perfectly by any means, and came out of that experience with some regrets. And Pat was just this patient, gracious teacher along the way, and always made me feel seen and respected and loved and valued. And that ultimately, coming out of all those challenging things that I described earlier, gave me a lot of confidence to keep going in public service, I think. Even though, again, my service was far from perfect. Just having somebody like that with multitudes of experience beyond mine say, no, you're doing great, you're doing the best you can, and this stuff is hard, made a huge difference in my life.
And Heather?
Yeah, so I definitely think I would be remiss if I didn't mention former Professor Dick Barrett, who was my economics professor back in the day. I started my undergraduate with what I thought was my plan, and took my first economics course and thought, maybe I should look at this as, as a minor. And Dick quickly convinced me of just switching my major entirely to economics. I really, through my law school career, coming back home to visit Montana while I was in DC, would always make a stop and have a chance to meet with Dick and catch up. And I think he certainly played a big role in the way I've thought about policy work and the work that I've done over the years. Many of those conversations were over beers at the Kettle House, which is such a great memory for me now. I think my time, I've had just so many incredible people I had the opportunity to work with. This is maybe less of a mentor-mentee relationship, but I just think there's some really incredible leaders of nonprofit organizations in Montana that do just amazing advocacy and service work that I've gotten the chance to learn from. Many of whom are women leaders in these organizations, and just being able to be part of kind of that broader infrastructure that I think really supports families and communities across the state. I've learned a lot from other organizations and from other organizational leaders, and that's been, I think definitely a key aspect of the work that I've done.
All right, thanks for that. That's the last of our introductory questions, and we'll be switching now into some broader questions. In general, tell us about campaigning. What are some of the most difficult things about running a campaign, and how did you overcome those obstacles? We'll start with Katie.
Great question. So campaigning. My first campaign was for HG 89 in the legislature so it was 2018. And I will openly say I'm an introverted person and I don't like to generally put myself out there too much, but campaigning, you can't do that. So you gotta get out on the doors. And so I thought this is gonna be really hard. I don't know if I can do it, but knocking doors is the best way to talk to people. And it ended up being much easier than I thought and very fulfilling, actually. That sounds funny to say knocking doors is fulfilling, but it can be. So that challenge of like putting yourself out there with your first campaign card with your face on it, huge, and your name, and it's like kind of embarrassing, but you just have to remember why you're there and do it. And everyone was receptive and people are great to talk to. And so that was definitely a campaign challenge to overcome, but no longer afraid of the door knocking. So.
All right, Heather?
Yeah, similar experience, I guess. I had never run for office until I ran for city commission. I had worked on other people's campaigns in the past, but really wasn't sure what it was going to be like to run and have to talk about myself and what I wanted to do. But I too really enjoyed knocking doors and talking to individuals one-on-one. I learned a lot. And it's kind of funny now, like there are people that I know a little bit in the community, but I know where they live. And it's like really funny because it's just like, you get to know every little area of your, of your district or of your city. And I've just learned so much while I was knocking doors. And so I think that was definitely one of the best experiences. And it is daunting to put your name out there But it was definitely a rewarding experience, the campaign aspect of it.
All right, Zach.
Yeah, so my first campaign was actually for, let's see, when I first ran for ASUM Senate, I was kicked off the ballot for turning in my expense report a few hours late, which said I spent $0. And then when I ran for, and then I was appointed after, because the people that beat me didn't want the job anyway, I guess. And then when I ran for ASU president, I was disqualified from the ballot again because my running mate and I ran around with Monty the Bear for about 45 minutes, which also was my first real clear memory that showed me that I'm actually an introvert. It was interesting to hear you say that, Katie. I don't think I really realized that until I got into politics, but I can do public speaking and all that. And I love policy work. And in some respects, I'm a really social person, but I found that campaigning is incredibly draining for me. And anyway, we ran around with Monty the Bear. I tried to hide for the whole 45 minutes. It was just almost traumatic for me trying to harass people on the Oval and in the UC. And then at the end of it, one of the ASUM senators who was supporting the other folks walked by and said, "This is illegal." And turns out it was, because Monty the Bear represents the university and the university can't endorse a candidate. So long story short, we had a very dramatic evening meeting where my running mate and I were censured. We weren't allowed to talk, and we sat there for nearly 8 hours listening to them debate about what to do with us. And they kicked us off the ballot, but then the concession was they allowed us to run a write-in campaign. And so we combined our two last names, Hagfors and Brown, into Hag Brown, and then ran a write-in campaign and won, which was thrilling, but also incredibly draining and dysfunctional. And then, since then, I sort of have been drugged through campaigns by lots of smarter, more energetic people than I. Knocking doors is a really fascinating learning experience. It doesn't mesh with my introverted instincts. But on the other hand, it's been incredibly rewarding to just get this sneak peek into other people's lives. You ask people, strangers, what they care about in a policy space, and you tend to learn very intimate details about their lives and their struggles and their family member with a health condition, or their proximity to poverty or financial duress, and on and on. And so that's been really neat. I think I'll wrap it up by just giving 2 thoughts of quick advice related to campaigns. For someone like me who doesn't thrive in that space, it's been imperative to surround myself with people that are really competent and energetic and can hold me accountable. Because sometimes getting me out of the house to go knock doors or go to an event when my tank is running on fumes is really important and needed, and left to my own devices, I wouldn't get out of the house. And I guess the other piece of advice is just that it's such an important part of the process, even if it's not fun or always your favorite thing to do. It's an imperative aspect of our democratic system. It's how you actually get an opportunity to talk with the people you work for as an elected official, and it's how people exercise their constitutional role in a democratic system. I was also going to say something else, but I forgot. So, oh well.
Great. Again, just as a reminder to everyone, you can still type in questions to the chat, and we will put them in our list and ask the panelists. The next question that we have, this will be a little different for Heather compared with Zach and Katie, but in terms of the Montana legislature, can you describe an average day in the life as just as a legislator, or in Heather's case, as a lobbyist? And I'll go ahead and kick that one off with Heather.
Yeah, well, I think we're all eager to see what this next session looks like, a day in the life of. But I think typically, you know, our organization is primarily a research organization. We do lobby during session, but we spend quite a bit of time in advance of session digging into possible policies that may come up. And so we do, you know, county fact sheets on certain policies, look at our tax structure, the state budget, and provide some analysis that can be helpful for legislators as they head into session. So a lot of the work that we do is really kind of behind the scenes in advance of session. You know, session is just, it's such a whirlwind. You know, it is 90 days every 2 years, and you can get into the rhythm of things, but it is very fast paced. And so, you know, you're spending your mornings testifying on legislation, tracking down legislators that you want to talk to, and kind of just sort of like getting a sense of where policymakers are at any given moment. So it's, you know, it's a fascinating process. And I'll let Katie and Zach talk more about their experiences, but I really enjoy session. I think Katie is right that like our legislators are very accessible, and I don't know that that's always the case in bigger states. And I would say that there is a real connection that they have to their constituents, and so really just being able to convey what it might mean for their district is something that we try to do as much as possible.
I'll toss it over to Katie.
I wasn't ready for the unmute there. Day in the life. So during session, it's a really long day. It's the 90 days, as Heather said, so it's very intense. But at least for me, my schedule was start daily at 7 a.m. with meetings with the House. I'm Democratic Party, so House Democrats. Then I'd go to a first committee. I'd have some sort of lunch meeting, and then I'm go to the floor to vote at 1 o'clock, and that can last for 1 to however many hours. And then you go to another committee to round out the end of the day. And after that, there's probably some sort of event to learn, meet lobbyists, get educated, or have some sort of snack. And so I was thinking most of my days went probably from 7 to 7, if not longer than that, just all day long, chatting with people, learning, getting educated in committee, running around a building, never seeing the sun, needing more vitamin D. And then it was over. So, but I'll let Zach tell a little bit more because he's been there longer than I have. But it's a long, intense day, but it's very short. And so you have not a lot of time to get a whole lot done.
Yeah. First, I remembered my little nugget about campaigns, which feels important to communicate, which is take care of yourself and the people around you when you're in a campaign. There are some campaigns that turn into this masochistic sufferfest where if you're not drinking too much and chain smoking cigarettes and staying up all night and just suffering, then you're not doing it right. And I just don't believe that that's the way to go about it. It's not sustainable. It's not healthy. And I've been around enough campaigns to see some that do it that way now and some that don't. And I really have learned to value the campaigns and the people that lead campaigns who take care of their people and take care of themselves and set a good example about just personal well-being and health. So just for a random thought, going back to the campaign thought, but yeah, the legislature is a wonderful process. My first session was 2013 when I was ASUM president, and I was able to spend a lot of the session in Helena. It was my last semester of college, and I was really close to graduation, and so I took a really light credit load, and I actually slept on the couch of our ASUM lobbyist for about 3 or 4 nights a week and was in Helena as much as I could be, and actually convinced a Missoula legislator to introduce a bill on this policy concept I'd been working. So I sort of was an unofficial lobbyist working the process that way. And that makes me think that part of the way you really understand to wrap your mind around the process, which is incredibly complicated by design, is just by trying to go through it and experiencing it firsthand. You know, the process is designed intentionally to kill most policy proposals. So a successful law that is signed by the governor has to make it through something like 12 or 13 affirmative votes. And so that gives so many people a bite at the apple and an opportunity to take something down or put a stop to it. And that's good because that means something that makes it into law is highly vetted. But it also can be very frustrating and mind-boggling to think that, oh my gosh, I put in all this work to get this many positive votes and I finally got it into out of the House, and then the whole process starts over in the Senate. The day-to-day, yeah, like Katie said, long days, talking to endless amounts of people, working on your bills, trying to keep up with your committee work, asking questions, listening, trying to just be present and mentally fit enough to kind of do good work and digest complicated issues in a really short period of time. Montana's system is remarkable and dysfunctional, I would argue, because we condense 2 years worth of work into 90 days every other year. And so it makes for an incredibly fast-paced 90 days. It also means that sometimes our capacity to tackle really complicated policy questions isn't really there. And that means that our interim committees play a really important role in vetting some of those really complicated policy areas or policy questions. And so if you end up being an addict of the process and wanting to just be around it and involved in it, or run for office, or lobby the hallways, or what have you, interim committees are a really important part of the process, I think, and something to just keep your eye on and pay attention to and learn about and participate in, because that's really where a lot of good complex work ends up happening. That's outside of the scope of what people can accomplish in a frantic 90-day session.
All right, and our final question is, what advice for students looking to get involved with politics? Let's start with Zach.
You actually chopped. Could you repeat the question?
No problem. Our final question is, what advice do you have for students looking to get involved in politics?
Great. Yeah, I think as I alluded to earlier, UM has a really healthy culture, in my experience at least, about just encouraging students to dive into the process. I think that ASUM provides a lot of good opportunities to get involved with university governance, which is a microcosm for one of the many complicated governance systems in our society. You know, city and county government make decisions that affect our lives every day. The legislative process and on up the ladder. I think just being willing to dive in and start to build those relationships, start to build that knowledge about the process that Heather alluded to. And those relationships turn into opportunities if you really do want to get involved. I mean, Katie said, described Stacy just encouraging her to continue to show up, and ultimately probably pressured her into running or something. And there are people like that looking for curious, interested, thoughtful humans to serve our community and our state all over the place. Had I not organized that conference as a sophomore in college in Helena, I wouldn't have met most of the key legislators that first encouraged me to run for the legislature here in Bozeman. The key one was Kathleen Williams, who was our candidate for Congress this last cycle, the last two cycles actually. But so I think just showing up and engaging is the first step. Investing in those relationships, investing in your own knowledge base about the process and policy issues, and it can just kind of take off from there.
All right, Heather?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with all of that. I mean, I think that there's a lot of different ways to get involved. I'll put a plug in for local as well. You know, something that I didn't really think about until I was on the city commission. We have a number of advisory bodies in the city of Helena that are really designed to take a look at specific local issues and then make recommendations to either staff or to the commission itself. They tend to be a little bit of a lighter load, so not a huge time commitment. And I think that often we are struggling, you know, to recruit folks to participate in those committees or advisory bodies. And you know, I think that young people can play such an important role, from how we, you know, how we're thinking about, you know, zoning and affordable housing to how we're using our trail system, you know. And so I think that there's a lot of different opportunities on a local level that can be really nice entry points to get a sense of how the process works and what the issues are. And also, you know, it builds your experience and a little bit of name recognition as well, that I think can serve you if you're thinking about getting involved at a bigger level as well.
Katie?
All right. A few specific things I've thought of. One would be, I was saying, join a neighborhood council. So at least in Missoula, there are neighborhoods. I don't know how many there are now, 20 something, and each one has a neighborhood council. And you're kind of the liaison between your neighbors and your city council. And so it's a great first step into getting to know your neighborhood and what people care about. And I thought it was really a lot of fun, pretty interesting. And so that's around. There's also boards and commissions across the state. For example, there's a board that deals with milk. There's a board that deals with art and culture. I don't know how many there are, lots of them, but they're looking for folks to fill in and get involved. And so that's a great way to get started. And then like Zach was saying earlier, is if you have an issue that's really important to you, maybe, or you specialize in, or something you've researched, reach out to your representative. Maybe you can champion a bill or help them get an idea started. And we don't have staff in Montana, so having any person who knows about something, who's an expert, willing to help us out or help us research a bill, like we'll, you know, generally take that. And so I think that's another way just to kind of dip your toes in the water and see if it's something you're interested in or if you like. And of course, you can always just run for something too. So.
Well, great. Thank you all. That is all the questions we have, and we are exactly 1 minute over. I want to take some time to thank Katie, Heather, and Zach for being panelists today. This was really great and really rewarding. And yeah, again, thank you so much. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks.